Hello, welcome to our overview of the major art and intellectual movements of the 18th century in Europe and America. We will begin with a look at the Rococo, which is really an extension of the Baroque styles that dominated the 17th century. The main difference is the extent to which exaggerated qualities dominated the visual tastes into the 18th century, especially in France, as political power was concentrated around specific absolute monarchs and their courts. And these powerful individuals sought to demonstrate their wealth and status with expensive works of art. We can see in our map of the 18th century Europe large kingdoms, ruled by kings who believed they were divinely chosen to rule and derived their power straight from God, covered most of this continent. The only exceptions are the many smaller kingdoms, principalities, and city-states that made up Central Europe, where the extravagant Rococo taste was less prominent. Termed the Age of Absolutism, the 18th century saw the decline of the power and authority of the religious institutions in favor of singular powerful monarchs who ruled with absolute control, meaning they did not share their political authority with other governing bodies for the most part. These absolute monarchs were often related to each other, cementing their power with strategic marriages and emphasizing the continuation of power from generation to generation. In art, we see that Rococo's style reflecting the extravagance of the ruling class, both in the portrayal of monarchs and royal families, and in the depiction of mythological and secular scenes that revolve around the whims of the nobility. Through the continued success of colonization and the wealth gained through trade and mercantilism, the aristocracy had resources to commission works made of ivory, gold, crystal, pearl, and other luxury materials. We begin with the embodiment of the absolute monarch himself, King Louis XIV of France. Known as the Sun King, Louis XIV presided over an ever-growing empire touched by the warmth of the sun and as bright and radiant as it as well. Louis XIV was known for saying, "L'État, c'est moi," meaning, "I am the state," making no designation between the man and the nation. The court painter Hyacinthe Rigaud paints a monumental scale work of Louis XIV, looking stylish and even slightly effeminate as he shows off his elegant attire and slim legs, recalling his prowess as a dancer and his accomplishment at the more refined arts and pursuits of the noble class. His golden sword protrudes from the layers of ermine and velvet drapery, reminding viewers of his sole control over France's military, as his proper right hand rests on his scepter. Our eyes can follow the scepter downwards to rest on the crown atop the cushion, confirming his identity as the monarch. He shares the space with no one and nothing else besides the evidence of his extreme wealth and the symbols of his royalty, looking down on us from his platform where he could stand or sit on his throne and preside over the world before him. The amount of gold found within Louis XIV's portrait is nothing compared to the palace where he resided, called Versailles, located just outside the capital of Paris. Desiring to be farther away from the normal citizens of France, Louis XIV ordered an extraordinary building campaign at Versailles, where he and his 20,000 courtiers isolated themselves from the trials and tribulations of life in France for the average citizen, to revel in their own luxury. As French citizens suffered from famines and religious wars, Louis XIV and his royal descendants sequestered themselves in this outrageous palace and its extensive gardens, forests, and hunting grounds around it. Perhaps the Hall of Mirrors, shown here, is the most representative interior space of Versailles. Stretching the length of the palace, this hallway runs down the central space and is covered in colorful marble and gold, dotted with exquisite crystal chandeliers. Louis XIV would take in the never-ending images of himself as he walked down this hall, reinforcing the presence and glory of his own person. It is not surprising that kings would consider themselves divine if they constantly occupied spaces like the Hall of Mirrors and Versailles. A true but tragic rags to riches story, Watteau was one of the most prominent artists of the early Rococo period. He was not born a noble, but rose to prominence through his paintings, meant for an aristocratic audience. Sadly, he died from illness when he was only 36 years old. But he did manage to leave behind many examples of art that helped define the interests and styles of the Rococo movement. Watteau's work here is sometimes called the Return from Cythera and the Embarkation to Cythera, depending on whether you view this gathering of people coming from or going to the mythological island of Cythera, known as the Island of Love. Watteau was known as a painter of fêtes galantes, outdoor scenes of revelry and pleasure. Here we see several couplings of men and women, whom we imagine are either about to embark upon a journey of love or are still enjoying the memories and pleasure of this journey. The couples form a line that winds down the slope toward two men rowing a boat or gondola, with little Cupid-like figures flying overhead. Everything from the clothing and colors to the postures and expressions of the individuals show a carefree social existence, something only the aristocratic class in France could even imagine for themselves. Unlike the dramatic tenebrism of Baroque painting, Watteau gives us a softer scene with a light, brushy touch that blurs the lines between forms and gives the whole scene a dreamy haze. Similar techniques were employed by a prominent court painter for Louis XV, the son and heir of Louis XIV. Boucher also depicted mythological scenes that revolved around love and lust, and here we see more delights of the flesh as well. The angelic figure of Cupid, son of Venus, the goddess of love, is held captive in the center of a trio of women who appear to be teasing him and flirting with him. Though Boucher does not appear as concerned with creating illusionistic perspective and the construction of a realistic environmental space, he does create implied lines that bring our eyes upward in a zigzag fashion. The figure with the red drapery closest to us at the bottom of the composition helps draw our eyes to Cupid, who seems to be delighting in his captivity. And there are two perpendicular implied diagonals created by Cupid and the woman to the right, as well as the nude woman hovering above Cupid's head. The feet of the little cherub above her bring our eyes upwards, taking in the fanciful components even more. Nothing about this scene appears real, but it is still inviting, drawing us in to join the fun and laugh out loud with the rest of them. Actual lines help delineate the forms, but a soft touch is applied with a profusion of flesh-toned pinks and soothing greens and blues, making this a relaxing and pleasurable scene for any noble or king. Fragonard helps bring some intrigue and drama to these playful scenes with his painting called The Swing. Our eyes are immediately drawn to the woman dressed in pink in the center, frozen in a moment of upswing as she kicks off one of her petite slippers playfully. The billowing dress around her emphasizes the opulence of her clothing, in much the same way that Louis XV's drapery was far longer and larger than necessary to cover his body. Once our eyes take in the woman on the swing, we can begin to follow the implied lines downwards to the right and the left, making surprising discoveries along the way. If we continue to follow the diagonal created by the ropes of the swing and the woman's body downward and to the left, we find a well-dressed man reclined, possibly hiding in the shrubbery below, strategically placed where he can catch a glimpse of her layered skirts. The statue of Cupid rises above him, with its fingers knowingly placed at its mouth, signaling to keep this naughty encounter secret. This reclined male figure is usually identified as her secret lover, hiding away while she is actually out with another man, who is hidden in the brush to the right of the canvas. We can just barely make him out in the shadows, and can tell that he is older and thus likely wealthier. This adds some deceit to the scene, but why should it bother the viewer, who is likely a wealthy man himself, familiar with the love intrigues of court life in France? Fragonard uses highlighting and detail to give the scene a sense of illusionistic depth, as the tree branches recede into the background and the blue sky peeks out from the wooded surroundings. Everything about this painting was meant to be playfully decoded by the viewer, emphasizing the new role for painting to be pleasurable and secular entertainment for the most wealthy in 18th century France. This concludes our brief look at art from the Rococo period in the 18th century.